is now in custody, and we know that consular officials in Germany from the United States are looking for any Americans who might have been involved here, either injured or killed, but so far no word that any Americans have actually been injured, Terry.
Yeah, these are as early hours right now, just a little over 2 hours ago is when this attack took place. And Brad, the police there in Magdeburg, Germany, west of Berlin, confirming this is an attack. And obviously, as Aaron points out from this video, it's a horrific kind of attack. No motive established at this point, but look, I was in Europe from 2013 to 2018 for ABC News. One of the main stories I did over and over and over and over again, including attacks on Christmas markets, were Islamist terrorist attacks. It certainly has the signature of that. We don't have that information yet, but it's been done before.
No doubt it's been done before. And sadly, Terry, as you well know, it's easy to do. All you need is the ability to get up to speed and not have a barrier, a truck, a patrol car in the way. If you don't have any of those, you can imagine at whatever speed this person was going, that it's just unbelievable how many people you could harm. I wouldn't be surprised if the numbers aren't even bigger than are initially reported. I hope not, but I think the reality certainly is there. This is textbook, if it's terrorism, this is pretty much textbook ISIS, Al-Qaeda. It's in their playbook. It's one of their preferences because it's easy to do, it's low tech, and you can have a lot of casualties. And if you pick an event like a Christmas gathering, you're going to even make a bigger impression, because clearly these things are all driven, again, if it's terrorism, you're trying to create fear in people. Well, I can't think of anything else that would be more fearful, perhaps, that maybe if you added an explosive to that, is the real issue. And I still think the key here is, I assume this guy is alive that was driving the car, or the person driving the car, is who is he, who sent him, and are there other attacks planned? Because this is such a ripe thing for groups to do. I'd be concerned about other locations, both in Germany and, let's face it, even in the United States.
Follow-on attacks. Brad, thank you for that. And Elizabeth, Brad points out it's so easy to do this kind of attack. It's low tech, low cost, and hard to stop. How do Homeland Security officials here in this country and around the world deal with this threat, which we've seen realized before in other cities?
I mean, this really is core to Homeland Security. Since 9/11, a lot of money has been funded, poured into protecting, making it harder to attack those mass gatherings. And certainly it's easier to do that when it's in an enclosed space like a stadium. And anytime you're dealing with open air and a lot of people, it becomes much harder to provide that protective barriers, layers, really. And certainly, as Brad has suggested, a lot of the tactics that we use are using what you already have in-house, especially for smaller communities where perhaps they're not as well resourced from a security standpoint, but your trash trucks, your dump trucks, snow plows, anything that would make it very difficult for a car to plow through. And then you're also looking at earlier interventions, trying to identify a person that seems troubled, that might be planning something. I mean, those are the two main ways. We want to protect the mass gathering, and then we want to ideally identify a potential perpetrator and disrupt their attack plans before they even are able to carry them out. But it is certainly one of the easiest types of attacks to carry out. As Brad mentioned, this is right out of the ISIS playbook. Pretty much after it became hard for people to fly to the Middle East to join ISIS, ISIS changed their tactics. This is mid 2010s, around 2014, 2015. ISIS said, no, stay where you are and use whatever weapon you can find. Use a knife, use a vehicle. In America, use a gun. And vehicle ramming in Europe in particular, we saw a number of attacks caused by ISIS or inspired by ISIS, and that if I had to guess, that's probably what we're seeing here today. Not that other groups haven't tried to duplicate ISIS's playbook. We have seen far-right extremists kind of learn from ISIS, so that's not outside the realm of possibility, but this is really ISIS's playing card, so that would be my first guess.
And I'm sure that the authorities are working on that as we're looking at live pictures there out of Magdeburg, Germany. I want to go to Tom Sufi-Burge. And Tom, in these pictures, we see the massive emergency response. Obviously, authorities saying at least 60 people have been injured. What are you hearing?
Yeah, we know, Terry, from hospital officials in Germany that some of those 60 people are in a serious condition. I think that's hardly surprising, again, just from that CCTV video and the speed at which the car ploughed into the crowd. We know that some of the victims were airlifted to hospitals in Germany. So that, again, gives you a sense of the scale of the response, the severity of this incident. Clearly it's a horrific attack. And as you've been saying, I mean, several years ago, I mean, Europe was plagued by terror attacks. Most of them Islamist inspired. We don't know the motive of this attack tonight, but I remember being in Nice in southeastern France in 2015 after that horrific truck attack along the seafront promenade, which killed scores of people. I think it's important to point out that more recently, Europe has had the problem of terror attacks way more under control. I mean, especially here in France. I mean, France back in 2015, 2016 was plagued by attacks, and more recently we've seen the French security authorities be much more preemptive in their response. I mean, it's quite frequent here in France that we hear about individuals being arrested who the police believe might have been plotting an attack. So they have certainly foiled many attacks in more recent years across Europe, and it's important to point out, I think also, European security agencies and officials work very much hand in hand. I mean, look, I and everyone else in this part of Europe live in the Schengen zone, right? So that basically means free borders, open borders. I mean, it means free trade and goods moving, but it also means people can move very freely. I mean, I can drive into Germany here from where I live in France, and yet I won't be checked at all. And so look, all of the security services across Europe will be, very much alive to what's happened in Magdeburg tonight. And I think there will be, clearly a bit of a rethink as we sadly, we're just into the Christmas period. I mean, I just picked up my kids from school, and for me, the festive period has just begun. And I think that's the sense across Europe. And Christmas markets in cities all across this continent are in full swing. I was at one in Poland just a few days ago. And as colleagues have been saying, I mean, it's hard to prevent this type of attack in all Christmas markets, and in particular smaller cities. And Magdeburg, just to emphasize, is a city of about 250,000 people, so it's not one of Germany's biggest cities, and that might have been why whoever carried out this attack saw it as a soft target.
Right, yeah, it is right in the heartland of Germany, as you say, not a massive city, but 250,000 people, a university town, a thriving city there in the middle of Germany. Aaron Katurski, let me get back stateside with you. And the threat to the United States that this kind of attack represents, what are you hearing?
No specific threat to any infrastructure in the United States, but out of an abundance of caution tonight, Terry, the NYPD says it will be deploying at holiday markets around New York City, not because there's any particular threat, but because the NYPD counterterrorism commissioner tells us she wants to make sure New Yorkers feel safe, that they are going to be able to go about their holiday activities in a safe environment. So you'll see undoubtedly quite soon an increased NYPD presence at holiday markets around New York City. Perhaps other cities will do similar. Terry, one other note, if I may. We're also hearing from U.S.-based law enforcement sources that the Germans are now treating what has occurred as terrorism. They have not ascribed a particular motive to the driver's action, but they are treating this as if it were an act of terrorism, and that will certainly bring forth additional resources, and perhaps it's also steering us in a particular direction here, Terry.
Right, no question that the German authorities, as Aaron reports, treating this attack, this horrific attack in Magdeburg, Germany. At least 60 people injured when a car at very, very high speed attacked a crowd of evening shoppers in one of those very popular Christmas markets in the heart of the old city of Magdeburg, which has one of the largest cathedrals, ancient cathedrals in Germany. Many people, scores injured and several dead. We don't have a death toll at this point right now. So let me go to Brad Garrett for a moment on the German authorities now treating this as an act of terrorism. No surprise given the nature of this attack. But what does that mean to you as a former FBI agent?
That means that the real key right now is the guy or person they have in custody. And whether they've got any information or not, hopefully they have ID'd him. The key is, does he have a phone? Go through it. Find out where he lives or places that he associates. Get into his computer if you can, any social networking, because if he's part of any group or organization or has been directed, he might be a lone actor. But let's just see. You've got to be able to move on that stuff as quick as you can. And the reason why, Terry, is the obvious. Is he connected to other people that are going to do the same thing at some other location? That's why it's so important to move on these things as quick as you can. Now, the Germans are pretty good at this, and so I would assume everything I've just said is in motion. Where he lives, where he works, where he goes to church, if that's relevant, or to if he's Muslim, in that direction of places of worship he might go to, a mosque. So all of that stuff becomes relevant as you draw a picture, because every defendant, you've got to figure out the tentacles to them. And we do this in every case. Sometimes there's very few. And there might be few with this person. Who knows? We'll just have to figure that out. And as you mentioned, I think Tom mentioned, there's suitcases in the back that could be suspicious. What's in them? Sometimes people take explosives. We don't know that to these kind of events. But you can imagine if, in fact, that were the case, what numbers we'd actually be talking about, way beyond 60.
Yeah, and that possibility, Brad, that you were talking about, that they need to make sure what connections, if any, the attacker in this incident now being treated as a terrorist attack by German authorities, what connections he may have had with others. I remember covering the Bataclan attack in Paris, and let me go to Elizabeth Newman on this. That was at a time when it did seem these attacks, there was just a rash of them. It seemed that they were happening every couple of weeks in a different city in Europe. It seemed that there was they never quite went away, but there was a sharp decline in the number of attacks. What do you think is happening here? Is this just the kind of one-off that can happen at any time, at any place in the world these days? Or is there something in the world situation that might be driving a greater risk right now?
Counterterrorism professionals have been sounding the alarm that ISIS-K in particular, which is the group that's out of Afghanistan and that area of the world, as opposed to the Middle East. ISIS-K has reconstituted and is inspiring, in some cases, maybe coordinating external, what they call external operations, so attacks that are occurring outside of their region. We had the attack at the Moscow Theater earlier this spring. There were some people in the United States that were arrested with known affiliation to ISIS-K, and we also saw the Taylor Swift concert get canceled in Vienna this summer because of some individuals that had been radicalized online. So there is a different threat environment compared to, say, 2 or 3 years ago. It's perhaps not like it was in 2015 or 2016. And what we're mostly seeing are individuals that are radicalized online and inspired to do violence using the tools that they either have on hand or get training online to either build a bomb or to just figure out the tactics of an attack. So it's perhaps not as sophisticated as we were dealing with almost 10 years ago, but nevertheless, it is a threat. And Terry, to your point, yes, we're always going to be dealing with this type of vulnerability. And any place that you have open spaces and you have freedom, there's always going to be that tension of how do we protect people but still let people have their freedom. And there are always bad actors that are going to try to take advantage of the most vulnerable spaces, and open air markets are one of those most vulnerable spaces. So it is, like, from a security standpoint, you're never going to let your guard down. But at the moment, we should not only have those standard level of vigilance, we should also probably have a heightened level of vigilance, because we do know that ISIS-K has reconstituted and they are trying to inspire individuals to carry out attacks all around the globe.
Yeah, that's very informative, Elizabeth. Thank you. That this is now a peculiarly or a newly dangerous time on this problem, Brad, which also knows no borders. Every country shares this risk. What can the U.S. government do to help the German government at this moment of tragedy and perhaps continued risk?
So, Aaron told you earlier that whoever he talked to, U.S. law enforcement, had information immediately. I can tell you that U.S. DOJ has information from the prosecutors and justice in Germany, because it is such a global problem, an issue, that the FBI, NSA, the CIA, every intelligence agency and law enforcement agency that have information about extremist organizations are all going to collectively pull their databases, because obviously at this point, hopefully, the Germans know who they're dealing with. Whether he's lying to them, they've printed him, figured out who he is, and get the information out to see if some other intelligence organization or law enforcement outfit has information on him, and what group, if it is true or accurate, that he's linked to. Information sharing ends up being so critical in these situations. If this really is beyond one person committing an horrendous act today, but you just have to assume the worst, that he is connected, and you pull every stop out you can from here, from every other allied country, and even sometimes, Terry, countries that we have horrible relationships with. I mean, really horrible, like Russia, like North Korea. There are places that on the intelligence level, we still talk to each other because it's in their best interest to talk to us. So we'll see. But this is going to be really important as they pull this together to see exactly what they have.
All right. And on that topic of the links and the cooperation that the good guys, right, the governments of the world trying to protect their citizens from terrorism have, we have a statement from the New York Police Department Deputy Commissioner of Intelligence and Counterterrorism, Rebecca Weiner. She says, quote, this incident reported by our international liaison post in Germany comes after 2 recent disruptions in the same region and a travel warning issued by the UK about Christmas market vulnerabilities. Unfortunately, this pattern of targeted attacks on holiday markets in Europe has been ongoing for years. I think we have Aaron Katersky on the phone. And Aaron, if you are there, obviously New York has been an epicenter. Oh, he's on camera. Thank you. Well, New York, one of the cities that has a hard-won expertise in this.
No question, Terry. And I think we've been looking at a number of law enforcement bulletins ahead of the Thanksgiving parade, ahead of New Year's Eve in Times Square, big mass gatherings get a lot of eyeballs. And one common feature, ever since the vehicle ramming attack in Nice, in France, has been blocker vehicles, big sanitation trucks or other vehicles that block intersections so that a car cannot get up to a meaningful speed and do like what we've seen on closed circuit camera today in Germany. That's been a regular feature and a continuing concern for the authorities when they plan these events. Today, we spoke with the Counterterrorism Commissioner, Rebecca Weiner. She said there is no specific threat to New York or to any of its holiday markets, but she wants people to feel like they're going to be safe when they go to them. And so out of an abundance of caution, she said you will see NYPD deployments at some of these markets. So they're all over the city. They're in many cities, Terry. And not because there's any threat, but because she would like people to feel safe. You'll see that increased uniformed presence all around the city now and for the foreseeable future leading through the New Year's Eve holiday.
Yeah, that makes good sense. And as you say, those big blocker vehicles in a city like Washington, obviously, which is one of the main targets for terror attacks around the world, even for something as simple as a folk festival on the Mall, you'll see these giant vehicles blocking access down any road where someone could pick up speed. And that's what we're seeing in this incident, in the horrific videos that have emerged. Someone at a very high rate of speed just flying into a crowd of people shopping for Christmas. Let me go back to Elizabeth Newman on the question that Aaron raised. You know, you're trying not just to stop an attack, but that's not enough to say that you've defeated it. People have to feel like they can still do things that in a normal, decent society they want to do, like go shopping at a Christmas market.
That's right. I mean, that's what's so difficult about terrorism. Terrorism, yes, there's the attack itself and horrific injuries and loss of life. That's horrible. But the reason we call it terrorism is that it instills terror into the community. It's designed, the legal definition is intended to coerce or intimidate a population. And so that intimidation can take the form of, I'm not going to go shopping today. I'm not going to take my kids to that holiday festival because what if something happens? And look, these are real concerns. When we see something like this happen, we struggle with how vulnerable we really are in an open society. And that's why I think we see the deputy commissioner taking these actions to reassure the public that they are there, that they have protective measures in place. And look, NYPD, they have lots of experience with this, sadly, because of some attacks that have occurred there. But they also just are the best of the best. What I would be more concerned about is maybe some of the smaller communities in the United States that aren't as well resourced, that don't have as much experience with this. And not to suggest, as she says, that there's any intel to indicate that something's going to happen here. But we do always worry after an attack like this of copycat attacks. Somebody that is not doing well, that might be on that pathway to violence. An incident like this can inspire other individuals on that pathway to say, today's the day I'm going to go do something. So it is important for all of us to remain vigilant. We should go out and enjoy the holidays. We should absolutely go to those gatherings. But like any other experience, whether it's the holidays or large public gatherings in the summer, if you see something, say something. If you have concerns about an individual in your life that you think is troubled, get that person help. Or if you have reason to believe that person is planning an attack, you need to call law enforcement right away. Do not brush that concern aside. Let law enforcement do their job to determine that there's nothing there. It really is incumbent upon all of us to keep our community safe. We definitely need our police and Homeland Security officials to do their job, but we have a role too as citizens and making sure that we stay vigilant in these environments. And if you see something of concern, don't hesitate to tell an authority so that they can do something about it.
Absolutely. And Brad, this threat, we are looking at live pictures now, Magdeburg, Germany, out west of Berlin in the heartland of Germany, where a terror attack, according to German authorities, they're treating it as such. A car rammed at very high speed, a crowded Christmas market. At least 60 people are wounded. Many dead, or several dead. We are told that we don't have an exact number at that right now. And Brad, they are emergency situation there, but also, as you keep pointing out, this threat may not be over. I remember that attack on the Bataclan Theater back in 2015 in Paris. On the same night, the stadium was bombed. They were coordinated in order to strike the most terrorists. That's got to be one of the main concerns that German authorities have right now.
Oh, no doubt. And that's why I've gone through the steps that hopefully they're taking, and I'm sure they are. But, you know, the real problem when law enforcement and DHS, et cetera, say there's no specific threat, they're being accurate. The problem with that statement is that we see so many attacks, and even going to mass shootings in this country, to even school shootings, it ends up being individuals. This person that they have in custody may well be connected to other groups, and he may well not be connected to other groups. If he's not, he's a lone actor. He's decided on his own to represent, if you will, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, ISIS-K, whomever it might be. It doesn't matter, that part of it. And he did this on his own. So if that would be the case, then you'd have a lone actor. And he wasn't probably on anybody's radar screen, or at least to the point where they're keeping an eye on him. And that's where all of this is so frustrating, is that if in fact you have a predominance of lone actors, which clearly has been the case to a large extent after 9/11, is that how do you defense against that? And, you know, to Elizabeth's point, it's only because somebody comes forward and tells you something is going on, and law enforcement gets in front of them. So it's another angle of, yes, you just run every trap line you can run on a person's background and who they're connected to, both digitally and in person. But when it comes to lone actors, you know, it's just a vulnerability that you can't get away from. And the only thing you can really do is defense the best you can. And obviously, in this last hour or so, we've been talking about ways to defense an open market, which can be clearly a challenge.
Very serious challenges. We're looking at the live pictures there in Magdeburg, Germany, where this terror attack took place a little more than 2 hours ago now, almost 3, I suppose. And we'll be right back with rolling coverage of this tragedy, this terrorist attack, apparent terrorist attack in Germany, right up to this.
The best moments deserve the best eggs, especially when they're Eggland's Best. It tastes so deliciously fresh, with better nutrition too. For us, it's eggs any style, as long as they're the best. Eggland's Best.
Here's the deal. You're losing 1% of your skin's collagen each year starting in your 20s. That's why you need me, your collagen banker. Collagen Bank strengthens the collagen you have and builds the collagen you don't. For plump and glowing skin.
At Great Wolf Lodge, the splashes are huge, the action never stops, and the smiles come easy. So bring your pack together and winter savings are here. Book now and save up to 40%.
I think we need a bigger yard.
With our credit? This yard's fine. Go long.
Too long. But didn't I hear I found you?
Yeah. Look, Credit Karma can show us how to improve our credit for free. Then we can get a place with the bigger yard.
You hear that, Nora?
Yay.
From free credit scores to home loans and everything in between. Intuit Credit Karma. Download the app today.
Y'all see this? Patrick Mahomes is saying goodbye. People was tripping.
Where are you going?
He was actually saying goodbye to his old phone.
I'm switching to the amazing new iPhone 16 Pro at T-Mobile.
It's the first iPhone built for Apple Intelligence. That's like peanut butter on jelly on gold. Get 4 iPhone 16 Pro on us. Plus 4 lines for $25. And save on every plan versus the other big guys. What a deal. That's a lot if you ask me. If y'all giving it away too fast, T-Mobile, slow down.
I'm Terry Moran in Washington as we continue to cover this breaking news out of Germany. U.S. law enforcement sources say a suspect has been arrested after a car plowed into a Christmas market in Magdeburg, Germany, killing several people, authorities say, and injuring approximately 60 people at least in Magdeburg, Germany. That's west of Berlin, a city of just under 250,000. This incident drawing a massive police and emergency response, as you can see there. Joining us now, ABC News senior investigative correspondent Aaron Katursky. And so, Aaron, what can you tell us? What are you hearing from your sources here in the United States about this attack?
The confirmed number of killed is 2 from the German authorities, Terry, but U.S. law enforcement sources believe the number may end up being higher than that. About 60 people injured when this car sped through a crowd. It appeared to be a black BMW, and the authorities are now checking to see if that car was rented or owned. They have the driver in custody, we're told, and so they are running down to find out who this individual is. No motive has been established, but we're told the German authorities are treating this as if it were an act of terrorism. Why? Why this market, this location, on this day in Germany? The authorities have not said, but they are treating this as a potential act of terrorism, and it is causing a ripple effect here in the United States. We spoke with the NYPD a short while ago. The Commissioner of Counterterrorism says the NYPD here in New York will be deploying at Christmas and other holiday markets around the city, not because there's any specific threat, but because they want people to feel safe in going on about their holiday activities, Terry.
Absolutely. Let's go to our contributor, Elizabeth Newman, a Homeland Security official and a veteran, really, of this continuing, ongoing, low-grade war against terrorism that the world has been engaged in for decades. Elizabeth, when you heard this news, given your background, given your continuing expertise in this area, were you surprised?
Sadly, no. You know, when you get through a holiday season and there's not a terrorist attack, that's usually when I'm surprised. I actually have this pretty strong memory. Early in my career, I was working at the White House. This is 2003, 2004, and we were dealing with a series of threats from al-Qaeda targeting holiday events. Of course, for any of us that lived through that moment, those threats felt so very real after 9/11. So there was a lot of rapid response and trying to figure out the right protective measures. You know, we are so far more advanced, lots of investment that has been made in training and in infrastructure to provide protection compared to where we were 20 years ago. So we've done quite a good job as a country of protecting against terrorists who are trying to do us harm, especially during the holidays. But the reality is it is a known priority for especially Islamist extremists to target during what is perceived to be as Christian or Jewish holidays. That would be a win that has significance for them. So it has always been a potential threat from ISIS, more so than al-Qaeda these days, and certainly anybody inspired by ISIS. And you also have the fact that it's just, you know, people have their guard down. It's the holidays. Everybody's happy. And so it's, in some ways, you have more mass gatherings. They often tend to be outside. The markets, the tree lightings, the ice skating, the hot chocolate, like just the things we affiliate with the holiday season create lots of opportunities. And so that is probably another reason why we often see these attacks. But Christmas markets in Europe in particular have often faced these threats. Sometimes the threats are disrupted in advance, thankfully. And unfortunately, in this case, this one was not disrupted in advance. So it is something we always are going to have to remain vigilant around the holiday season.
Absolutely. Thank you, Elizabeth. And I want to bring in ABC News national security and defense analyst Mick Mulroy, who has also worked on these issues over the years, like Elizabeth has, in the government. And Mick, Elizabeth talks about this is a soft target, this kind of Christmas market where people have their guards down naturally because they're in a celebratory mood. It's the season, the holiday season, the Christmas season. And as she also noted, it is a season that is particularly of interest to Islamist terrorist. We don't have an identity on the attacker at this point, but because of the cultural significance of the holiday.
Well, that's right, Terry. I mean, this is part of the German culture, and of course, it's part of it's Christianity. It's a religious event. Ultimately. So I think we don't know yet, to your point, we don't know what the motive was, but if this is terrorism, it might be that they hit that because of that. Also, because there's a lot of people that are going to attend these events, and they're very vulnerable to an attack by a vehicle like this. It's very difficult to get weapons, very difficult to get explosives in Germany, but obviously, just like everywhere else in the world, you can always get a vehicle. And if this was a terrorist attack, it was the weapon of choice, and it obviously had a major effect, unfortunately, on the people that were attending this event.
All right, and let me just briefly go back to Aaron Katersky. Aaron, do you have any information? I spoke out of turn in a way. What are your U.S. sources saying about the person who was apprehended by police as the suspect in this attack? Are they saying anything?
Well, they're trying to run down who this individual is and what his motivation may have been. We're starting to get some reporting that I'd like to get some extra sourcing on, Terry, before we put it out there. But it seems as if now the German authorities have a sense of who this person is. It appears the black BMW that sped through the crowd at the Christmas market had been rented recently. They're going over the car records to confirm that. And we were told that inside the vehicle there may have been some, what sources described as suitcases or boxes. They're obviously interested in what those contain, so they're going through that vehicle right now to make sure there is no follow-on threat. But all of that, I assume the Germans would have well in hand by now, because we're, what, about 2-3 hours since this occurred. No specific identity has been released as of yet, but I think the Germans are getting a sense now, Terry, of who this person is, and perhaps will be able to ascribe some kind of motive. But they are, as our sources have told us, treating this as an act of terrorism.
Right, and thank you, Aaron, for that. Keep us posted on your reporting. The German authorities treating it as an act of terrorism, and they did apprehend the person they believe was driving that car that at very high speed rammed into that Christmas market. So joining us now over the phone, ABC News contributor and former acting Undersecretary for Intelligence at the Department of Homeland Security, John Cohen. So, John, what do you make of this situation? What are your concerns, given your experience?
Well, as Elizabeth said earlier, unfortunately, I'm not surprised. We're in a highly volatile threat environment. We have seen increased calls for attacks by organizations and on forums associated with the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda. In fact, this current incident is already being celebrated on those same terrorist-related forums, where and that causes concern amongst law enforcement of the potential for copycats. As was also mentioned earlier, this is exactly the type of target that a terrorist group would seek to direct an act of violence against. It's crowded, it's public. There is an ideological rationale for hitting something that's symbolic of Christianity. And so, that is one of the reasons why going in, even with little information, the German government's going to treat it like it were a terrorist attack. Now the real work begins. They have a suspect in custody. They're going to want to identify who that person is. They're going to see if there's any information or intelligence that gives them insight into what the possible motivation is. They're going to look at his communications. They're going to look at his online footprint. They're going to look at what content he's been consuming online. Does it include anything that gives insight into his ideological belief system? They're going to look at when he rented the car, what's in those suitcases, and that's when we'll learn in the next day or so more about who this person is, was he ideologically motivated, and was he working with other people.
All those questions investigators poring over now in order to get at this attack and see what links this attacker may have had to others. We're going to have continuing coverage of this apparent terror attack in Magdeburg, Germany, right after this.
Off the asphalt, outside city limits, far beyond expectations. With standard all-wheel drive, the off-road ready Mazda CX-50. We're looking for outsiders.
Delicious flavors worth fanning over. They're great.
Pain hits fast, so get relief fast. Only Tylenol Rapid Release Gels have laser-drilled holes. They release medicine fast for fast pain relief. Tylenol Rapid Release Gels.
Not your bank's top priority? Here at Wintrust, we take a different approach to banking. No hidden fees or runarounds, but a true banking partner focused on your unique financial goals. Whether you're opening your first account, found your dream home, planning for the future, or starting a business, we have the financial solutions to get you there. Stop settling and start experiencing a better way to bank. Wintrust, different approach, better results.
Real Amazon customer reviews, performed by a real serious actor. I kept getting asked, "Hey, what brand of mascara do you use?" I asked, "Is this because everyone saw me cry in public, but my mascara still looked great?" The answer was, yes. 5 stars. Angel B.
Whenever news breaks,
we are here in Israel, a nation at war after that brutal surprise attack by Hamas.
On the ground in Ukraine, reporting from Lewiston, Maine.
The scene of a horrific mass shooting.
ABC News Live is right there everywhere.
From the scene of that deadly missile strike in Dnipro, Ukraine.
Reporting from the earthquake in Turkey.
In Rolling Fork, this tornado tore through this little town.
From the most devastating disaster in Hawaii.
From Charleston, South Carolina, on the 2024 campaign trail.
In Iceland, let's go.
Traveling with the president in Mexico City.
Wherever the story.
From the front lines from southern Israel.
Outside the Gaza Strip.
In Beirut.
From the FBI.
Reporting from the nurses on the picket line.
Here at 10 Downing Street in London. Streaming live to you.
Wherever the story is.
Wherever the story is.
Wherever the story is. We're going to take you there.
You're streaming
ABC News Live.
ABC News Live.
You're streaming ABC News Live.
ABC News Live. Streaming free everywhere. America's #1 streaming news.
Whenever, wherever news breaks, it's so important to always remember that lives are changed. Here in London, in Buffalo, Uvalde, Texas, Edinburgh, Scotland. Reporting from Rolling Fork, Mississippi. Ukrainian refugees here in Warsaw. We're heading to a small community outside of Mexico City. Getting you behind the stories as they happen. ABC News Live Prime. We'll take you there.
Stream ABC News Live weeknights wherever you stream your news. Only on ABC News Live.
All right, we're continuing to follow breaking news out of Germany, that terror attack in Magdeburg, Germany, west of Berlin. I want to go to our senior investigative correspondent, Aaron Katersky. Aaron, I understand the German authorities now believe they have an identity of the suspect who was arrested in a car, the car that flew at high speed into a crowded Christmas market. What can you tell us?
This was a doctor of Saudi descent, in his 50s, about 50 years old or so, who had been living in Germany since 2006, and he drove a rented BMW at a high rate of speed, very fast, through, and we've seen it on closed-circuit video, through this crowd at the Christmas market in Magdeburg, and you can see the aftermath pictures there. Terry, we've been told that the Germans are treating this as if it were terrorism, even though they have officially ascribed no motive. And a Saudi doctor in his 50s who's lived in Germany since the mid-2000s doesn't exactly fit the bill of recent Islamic State type actors. So the authorities, I think, are treading carefully here to see exactly what the motivation is going to be. Naturally, they treated this as terrorism because of I think, obvious reasons, given recent history in Christmas markets and vehicle ramming concerns, as called for by foreign terrorist organizations like the Islamic State. But that demographic, the doctor in his 50s who's lived in the country, since 2006 doesn't necessarily fit the mold.
That's a very good point, Aaron. Thank you very much. That information coming from the Prime Minister of that state, Saxony-Anhalt, where Magdeburg is located, saying that the suspect is a doctor from Saudi Arabia, as Aaron just reported, in his 50s. Let me go to Brad Garrett on Aaron's point. The kind of Islamist terrorists that we have seen in our own country and elsewhere, they tend to be young men, not established in life, and easily perhaps persuaded by the ideology of terrorism. And the caution that Aaron gives us to be careful and about assigning motivation given that difference is one thing. But what do you make about this report?
So let's look at two different things, Terry. One is, let's just go with what Aaron said for a second. Doctor in his 50s from Saudi. You might recall several years ago there was an airport attacked, I believe, in Scotland, and the attackers, most of them were doctors. Now, I just throw that out, that also we also stereotype people who commit terrorist acts. So that is out there. Doesn't mean he's a terrorist involved with any group, but that's one thing to think about. The other is something I mentioned when we first started talking about this earlier, is was there a medical event? Is there something other than he just did this on purpose? I mean, it could even be a car malfunction. You remember, I think a year ago Thanksgiving, we went on the air and talked about a car up on the Canadian border that looked like it was trying to ram its way through a bridge to come into the United States or leave. I can't remember. It doesn't matter. But we treated that for at least 2 hours that it was probably a terrorist event. But if you look at the video, and they kept looking at it, that guy had a medical event, you know, and he was going really fast because he had a heart attack, and I remember, and he floorboards it when that happens. Now, you would guess if that was going on in this case, he would have had to have medical attention before they could have interviewed him. So that may or may not play into this. I'm only suggesting, and you just brought it up, not to jump to conclusions about what this is. It might be terrorism, and it might be something else.
It might be as well, and sometimes it is difficult to say. One remembers the disappearance of flight MH370, which was never resolved, but which many investigators believe was some kind of deliberate ditching of that plane full of passengers. Once again, a middle-aged man at the controls. That remains a mystery there. But let me go to Mick Mulroy, who has spent years in government and out on national security issues and this particular issue of security against these kinds of attacks. What can U.S. officials do at this point, Mick, to support the Germans as they try to get a hold of what happened in this awful tragedy?
So, Terry, I think right now both the German intelligence services and obviously the U.S. intelligence community is going to be standing by to assist in this investigation. And what I mean by the investigation is if this individual is talking, he's going to send a lot of information out there that can be validated or not. The phone that he might have had on him, they could be looking at social media accounts now to see if there's any connections to ISIS, Al Qaeda, other groups that would conduct a terrorist attack. We don't know that this is a terrorist attack, but these investigations from the intelligence side could help determine whether it was in fact an a terrorist attack. There's also, he's Saudi Arabian, so it's likely that the intelligence services are talking to the Saudi Arabians right now, asking their intelligence service, is there any information on this individual? There's a lot that can go on the background that can really help the law enforcement side of this determine whether it was or wasn't a terrorist attack, whether there were other people participant in this, whether there's other people that might try to launch another attack that could be associated with these individuals. This is all speculation. We don't know if that's true, but that's what the intelligence services, both the German, the European, and the U.S. could be doing right now, and I think they likely are.
Right, in this emergency out of Germany. Thank you, Mick. Let me go back to Brad Garrett on something that Aaron reported that comes from authorities in Germany, that the suspect drove a car that he had apparently rented a short time before. What does that tell you?
So that's a little suspicious, but you'd also have to know that in context, Terry. In other words, is he a guy that rents cars all the time? Had he rented from this location or other locations just because he's maybe a guy that rents cars? If he doesn't do that and he rented it shortly before this attack, days, whatever it might be, you need to really check that out. And again, if he's somebody that's involved, he decided on his own or connected to a group to commit this horrible act intentionally, then there's going to be something, like in every person who does versions of mass killing, there's going to be basically a trail of something, writings, who he talked to online, who does he talk to on his phone. So it might take on a different context, if you will, of not being maybe part of an organized group, but somebody that just became disillusioned and radicalized. So there's that component. But, you know, the car becomes key because he did rent it. And there are items in the car, we don't know what those are, and they may not be relevant at all, or they may be completely relevant. Why are they in there? Why are there, if there are a lot of them, let's say, why are there? What was he doing with those? Now, obviously, the game changes if there's something in there that could harm people, like explosives. So we'll see where that goes. But one of the keys at every crime scene that I've ever gone to is we start with, what do you have tangibly in front of you? You know, if it's a shooting, like in New York recently, you have shell casings, you have cameras, you have all sorts of things you can tangibly look at. In this case, it's a car. And so, like I said, you need to go sort of through the full history of, is this something that he does all the time? He rents cars, he rarely does it, and he rented this one recently. That still doesn't mean this is terrorism. It still could be a medical event. It still could be a malfunctioned car. That doesn't go to the top of my list, but it's there. And it's one of those things in law enforcement, there's always a tendency, and I used to fall into this myself, is you get tunnel vision about what you have, and oh yeah, it's got to be that. Well, it doesn't have to be that. It can be three other things that you need to pay equal attention to as you put this case together.
Yeah, that is a great point, Brad, not just for investigators, but for reporters and broadcasters as well. We tend to get tunnel vision. What we know right now is a car at very high speed slammed into a very crowded Christmas market in the city of Magdeburg, Germany, west of Berlin, 100 miles or so. City of 250,000 people out for the evening at that time, about 3 hours ago now. Christmas shopping at that market. German authorities say at least around 60 injured and several fatalities. They still have not confirmed how many fatalities in this attack. And if I can go to Elizabeth on that, Brad talked about what tangible things do investigators have? They have that car. How significant is that to you?
Well, the car's going to be very important to piece this together. I do think that the German authorities wouldn't have called it out as terrorism if there were signs that this individual was having a medical incident. So I think that's probably unlikely, especially several hours after the attack, that this was intentional. Now, terrorism does usually have an ideological motivation. And so for them to make that assertion, it implies that this isn't just a grievance-based attack. And what I mean by that is, as we have seen in the United States, sometimes we have people carry out an attack. Even the CEO of United Healthcare that was killed recently, generally speaking, we call that an act of targeted violence, not an act of terrorism, because it's grievance-based. It's not necessarily affiliated with a specific ideology like ISIS or Al-Qaeda adheres to, or like a neo-Nazi might adhere to. And, you know, the terms get a little gray in places, and so we really don't know motivation yet. But the fact that they're willing to call it terrorism suggests to me that they have some indications that there's an ideological motivation.
Right, and they are working on what that might be. Once again, the latest news from The Prime Minister of Saxony-Anhalt, the state of Germany in which this attack took place, where Magdeburg, the city, is located, has said that the suspect is a doctor from Saudi Arabia in his 50s. He's lived in Germany since 2006 and rented the car that was driven through that Christmas market. We're going to take a break with more coverage right on the other side.
It takes courage to embrace your extraordinary. Burberry Hero, the new parfum.
Nothing makes a gathering great like Eggland's best eggs. They're just so delicious. With better nutrition, too. For us, it's eggs any style, as long as they're the best. Eggland's best.
Here's the deal. You're losing 1% of your skin's collagen each year starting in your 20s. That's why you need me, your collagen banker. Collagen Bank strengthens the collagen you have and builds the collagen you don't. For plump and glowing skin.
When you're the leader in disaster cleanup and restoration, how do you make like it never even happened happen?
Fire it up, Randy! By being prepared for anything!
Whatever comes your way, there's a pro for that.
Serve Pro. Like it never even happened.
We ready?
I need to get me a new phone.
You need to trade in that old busted up phone. You can get you a brand new iPhone 16 Pro from T-Mobile. It's on them. At T-Mobile, it's better over here. Families save 20% every month. What a deal.
To all you new and existing customers, trade in your busted old phone and T-Mobile will give you a brand new iPhone 16 Pro with Apple Intelligence on us. Plus, families can save 20% when they switch.
T-Mobile is one of none. Go get that.
What he said.
At Great Wolf Lodge, the splashes are huge, the action never stops, and the smiles come easy. So bring your pack together and... Winter savings are here. Book now and save up to 40%.
I think we need a bigger yard.
With our credit? This yard's fine. Go long.
Too long. But then I hear I found you.
Yeah. Look, Credit Karma can show us how to improve our credit for free. Then we can get a place with a bigger yard.
You hear that, Nora?
Yay.
From free credit scores to home loans and everything in between, Intuit Credit Karma. Download the app today.
Whenever, wherever news breaks, it's so important to always remember that lives are changed. Here in London, in Buffalo, Uvalde, Texas, Edinburgh, Scotland. Reporting from Rolling Fork, Mississippi. Ukrainian refugees here in Warsaw. We're heading to a small community outside of Mexico City. Getting you behind the stories as they happen. ABC News Live Prime. We'll take you there.
Stream ABC News Live weeknights wherever you stream your news. Only on ABC News Live.
Hello, I'm Terry Moran in Washington. We are continuing to follow the breaking news out of Germany. U.S. law enforcement sources say a suspect has been arrested after a car traveling at high speed plowed into a Christmas market in Germany, killing several people and injuring approximately 60 others. This happened in Magdeburg, Germany. That's west of Berlin. The incident just drew a massive police and emergency response. And joining us now, ABC News senior investigative correspondent Aaron Katersky. Aaron, what can you tell us is the latest out of Germany on this attack?
According to German and American sources, approximately 60 people have been hurt and at least 2 killed after someone rammed a black BMW at high speed through a crowd at a Christmas market there in Magdeburg, Germany. The suspect, who is in custody, has been identified as a doctor originally from Saudi Arabia in his 50s who has lived in Germany since at least 2006. We know that initially the German authorities, we were told, were treating this as potentially an act of terrorism, although in looking at the makeup of the person in custody now, doesn't exactly fit the mold of someone who you might consider to be like an Islamic State type adherent. But we don't know. The authorities have been going through the car to see if there's anything in there that could represent a follow-on threat, and they're no doubt doing a deep dive into who this Saudi doctor living in Germany since 2006 is and what his motivation may have been. Early word, Terry, there are no Americans who were hurt in this, but we know consular officials were checking, especially with area hospitals, who are now treating some of the injured. We have not heard about the severity of the injuries, but if you look at what happened on closed-circuit camera, you see the vehicle speeding through the crowd, people diving out of the way. Undoubtedly, some of the injuries have to be quite serious. The Germans have confirmed 2 killed, although there is fear the number could go higher depending on that severity of injuries. And right now, the focus, of course, is on who this suspect is and what his motivation may have been.
Absolutely. Aaron Katersky, thank you for that. We are going to continue to cover this story out of Germany, but here in Washington at this moment, lawmakers are just about to vote on a funding bill that could avert a government shutdown within hours. A debate is underway on the floor of the House of Representatives as Republicans scramble to reach an agreement ahead of the midnight deadline. Speaker of the House Mike Johnson vowed a shutdown will not happen. He says Republicans are unified. That remains to be seen. 2 previous bills have already failed to draw enough support to keep the government open past this midnight tonight deadline. The first bill was on track to pass before Elon Musk publicly condemned it, and then President-elect Trump followed suit. He called for any spending measure to include a measure that would raise the debt ceiling. That's a demand that broke the carefully negotiated agreement. So Trump posted on social media earlier today, writing in part, quote, "If there is going to be a shutdown of government, let it begin now under the Biden administration." Let's bring in ABC News' Jay O'Brien. He's live on Capitol Hill covering these fast-moving events. So, Jay, what can you tell us?
Yeah, Terry, right now, House Democrats are meeting. They're gathering right just about a floor below me, and they are here to answer the central question in all of this now, which is what are House Democrats going to do? And that's because Speaker Mike Johnson, as you said earlier this afternoon, unveiled his Plan C that he came to an agreement to with House Republicans. It is essentially an extension of government funding until March, also disaster relief, also aid for farmers, but not, as you mentioned earlier, that extending of the debt ceiling that President-elect Trump had demanded. That is a package that ultimately ended up, despite the fact that it bucks a key wish of President-elect Trump, and ended up getting the support of House Republicans. They are now going to put it on the floor tonight under what's called suspension of the rules, which is a procedural move. It guarantees them essentially a quicker vote than they would have normally gotten, but it requires a 2/3 majority of the House to pass, which means a chunk of about 80 or so House Democrats. So what House Democrats want to do here, can they get behind this package, is a key open question that we do not know the answer to at this hour, Terry. Remember, that government funding package, Mike Johnson's Plan B, the one he put on the floor last night, did not get the requisite number of Democrats it would have needed to pass. And it also got about 30 Republicans voting against it because they had their own ideological objections. So it's House Democrats who really have the ball in their court and a lot of the power here. If Hakeem Jeffries tells Democrats not to vote for this package because they have some ideological disagreement with it, or they don't like the way it was negotiated, or they don't like the way it was struck, that could put us squarely on course with the government shutdown come midnight.
And 2 point, thank you, very clear. And let me just 2 follow-up questions. First, this statement that was this emotion or attitude that Trump expressed, let the shutdown come if necessary and just blame it on Biden. Do you feel that, has taken hold in the Republican caucus? And then the second question I have is, say this one collapses, do they have enough time to go back to the drawing board before midnight?
Definitely not enough time to go back to the drawing board before midnight, Terry. If this collapses, there is almost certainly going to be a government shutdown, and the question then becomes not necessarily if, but for how long. But we are not there yet. To your first question on President-elect Trump, one of the things that we've been asking House Republican leadership, particularly Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, is has the president-elect blessed this new plan? Because remember, it doesn't include a raising of the debt ceiling like Trump had demanded. And so if he wants to tank this deal, presumably he could try to do that like he and Elon Musk did to Mike Johnson's Plan A, his first attempt, Speaker Johnson's, to avert a government shutdown. I asked Speaker Johnson not long ago after he unveiled his plan, or at least after he had pitched it to House Republicans, has President-elect Trump weighed in on this and has he blessed it? And Johnson didn't answer that question. That was a few hours ago. It's unclear if the two have spoken, but President-elect Trump is another one of those open questions. Not just how do Democrats feel about this, but how does he feel about this? And does he make his wishes known before they vote in just the next few moments from now, Terry?
All right, Jay, thank you for that. Let's bring in our ABC News senior White House correspondent, Selena Wang. Selena, you spent a lot of time in Mar-a-Lago and close to the president-elect. It almost seems like one of the problems here is there's a kind of de facto co-presidency going on. Or if not that, at least you've got the private citizen billionaire tail wagging the president-elect's dog, right? If that makes sense to you. I mean, who's leading this? Is Musk calling the tune here, or is Trump?
Yeah, and you had key members of Congress who were calling Musk President Trump or President Musk or co-President Musk. But look, I just got off the phone actually with a source who is familiar with the president-elect's thinking, who is really stressing to me that this is not Elon Musk who is driving the boat. The source's spin is that Donald Trump and Elon Musk are very much on the same page, that Musk did not drag Trump into this chaos, and also expressed that Donald Trump has been talking to Speaker Johnson about the issues around the spending bill, about it including too much in it, and has also been talking to Speaker Johnson, according to this source, about the debt ceiling request for quite some time now. The source telling me that Donald Trump has spoken to Johnson about his demands to either extend or remove that debt ceiling multiple times since the election, saying that there are some concerns that it hadn't been properly socialized with the Republican conference. But look, what is interesting here, though, is the fact that it is being portrayed as that last-minute demand, considering that this source is telling me that Speaker Johnson had known about this for weeks now. But what I also learned from the source is that, look, even if Donald Trump doesn't get everything he wants, that they can still spin this as a win for a couple of reasons. Number one, they can say that they got a lot of the fat cut out of this deal. And number two, that they were able to strategically see where the Republican conference is. We saw from that vote last night that there just is not enough support for that debt ceiling removal. They saw that there were about 38 Republicans who defied Donald Trump and voted down that deal. So they can still spin this as a win, even if Donald Trump doesn't get his primary demand, which is to eliminate or to extend that debt ceiling.
That's very interesting, Selena. That spin sounds a little bit to me like making chicken salad out of chicken something or other. But let's bring in to ABC News' Alex Brochet. Alex, you've been doing some reporting on what a government shutdown means in practical terms for ordinary Americans.
Well, in practical terms, Terry, I mean, this jeopardizes a lot of people's just livelihood, frankly. An estimated 3.5 million federal workers could be impacted this holiday season by a government shutdown, especially if the shutdown lasts past January 3rd, which is when it's estimated that some of those checks, when some of those workers could start missing at least the first of those checks. And so, I mean, you have a slew of workers that would be working without pay, about 1.3 million members of the military, about 350,000 members of the Department of Defense. And, you know, we've been talking to these families. And frankly, right now, I mean, the holidays are already kind of a crunch time for so many financially. But, you know, this has really kind of thrown them into limbo. One military spouse saying that, you know, she's disappointed with how some of our politicians and non-political political actors are talking about a government shutdown so cavalierly, as though they don't have a person or a name or a face, attached to them. And the fact of the matter is, you've got 1.3 million members of the military that are impacted by this. You've got about 60,000 members of TSA, about 13,000 air traffic controllers here. All these folks that would be forced to basically work without pay if this shutdown goes into the new year.
Yeah, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays from the federal government. And Jay, I want to go to you on how we got here. Look, we've had government shutdowns come and go. People get frustrated with them. As Alex says, they have very real-world consequences for a lot of Americans. But usually, in between election and inauguration, the government just does its business, waits for the next guy to come in, and then he gets saddled with the problems. What happened here?
Yeah, and even at the beginning of this week, Terry, there wasn't this kind of drama and looming shutdown as we are at now. And this really came to pass when Mike Johnson unveiled on Tuesday night his long-awaited plan to fund the government. And remember, that was a plan that included not just a government and funding extension to March, but it also included that disaster relief that we were talking about, that aid for farmers. There were provisions in it combating China. There was a pay raise for members of Congress. There were a number of things stuffed into that bill. It was about 1,500 pages. And immediately, further right members of Johnson's party, those spending hawks, they balked at that. They didn't like the way Johnson went about it. They didn't feel that they were able to give input. They felt that there were things that were unnecessary in the legislation. And then the next morning, that Wednesday morning, it drops on a Tuesday night, the Wednesday morning, Elon Musk starts tweeting in opposition to that legislation. And that starts a snowball. I talked to Republican members who said, in their view, Elon Musk turned some yes votes potentially into no votes in the Republican conference. And even if he did that, I've heard from Republicans who say he gave air cover to those further right Republicans who were always going to oppose this measure because they don't like any kind of temporary extension of government funding. They have ideological disagreements with it. They don't believe that that's how government should be run. So it started to put Mike Johnson between a rock and a hard place. And that only got increased when President-elect Trump weighed in late that same day, saying, as you and I discussed earlier, that any temporary extension of government funding should be linked to a raising of the debt ceiling, an issue that was in no way involved in this, an issue that doesn't need to be addressed until the spring of what will be Donald Trump's second term in the coming months from now, and potentially with certain measures, it doesn't have to be addressed until the summer. But Donald Trump said he didn't want to deal with it, essentially, in his second term, and he said if the debt ceiling needs to be raised, it should be raised in the final days of Joe Biden's term in office. All of that to say Mike Johnson's position got contracted even more, and Republicans had to throw out their plan, throw it into the garbage, and craft a new plan. That's the plan they put together yesterday. It's the plan they put on the House floor last night, and it's the plan that Democrats balked at because, A, they say Mike Johnson walked away from a bipartisan deal that was negotiated in good faith at the urging of Elon Musk and President-elect Trump, and B, they didn't like that debt ceiling maneuver because in their view, it was Donald Trump taking what could be a bargaining chip away from them, what they could have used to possibly negotiate over certain kinds of legislation in the early months of Donald Trump's second term. They didn't like any of that political maneuvering. So they vote en masse against the legislation last night. And that puts us where we are today. Mike Johnson having to scramble, putting together that Plan C that I was talking to you about earlier on in the broadcast, and us waiting now as these Democrats go downstairs to gather behind closed doors to figure out what Democrats think about this Plan C, and will they vote against it the way they did on that Plan B last night.
Yeah, they helped tank it, no question. And given the tiny margins of the majorities in both the House and the Senate, you'd think it would force them to work together, but no, that's Pollyanna. We have a president-elect, but Selena Wang, where's the president? Where's the current president of the United States, Joe Biden?
Yeah, as we are barreling towards this possible government shutdown and as this chaos is escalating, it is striking that President Biden has been completely out of the public conversation on this. So I asked the White House press secretary today why we haven't seen from the president, why we haven't heard him weigh in, why he isn't putting the pressure on Republicans, why he isn't amplifying the real world consequences if there is a government shutdown. And her argument is that this was the Republicans' fault. This is their mess, and it's their job to fix it, not the president's job to fix it. And I also asked the press secretary about conversations from Democrats and some key Democrats calling Elon Musk President Musk, and whether she thinks it is Donald Trump or Elon Musk driving the boat here with those House Republicans. And this is what she said. Just lastly, some leading Democrats are calling Elon Musk President Musk or co-president Musk. What is the White House's and President Biden's reaction to this labeling of Elon Musk, and whether or not House Republicans are listening more to this billionaire than the president-elect?
What I can say is congressional Republicans did what they did because of what the president-elect said and what Elon Musk said. That's the reality. You guys all reported this. That's why we are where we are today. So this is for Speaker Johnson to fix. This is the mess that he created.
So the White House insists that President Biden has been in touch with congressional leaders and that the team has as well. But again, striking, we haven't heard from the
bill. And now we've got to evaluate the four corners of what remains in the legislation.
Does that mean Democrats should vote for it if what needed to come out came out?
Well, that's what we're going to discuss. But the reckless effort to remove the ability for the American people to have a real discussion in terms of fiscal responsibility by trying to jam a debt ceiling suspension into the legislation at the 11th hour was not sustainable. That effort has come out because that was all about Republicans trying to cut Social Security and Medicare while cutting taxes for the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected. And that is why Donald Trump and Elon Musk demanded that the debt ceiling provision be placed into the bill at the 11th hour. That has now come out, so we can evaluate the legislation on the four corners of the bill, and that's what we're going to do.
Did Speaker Johnson consult you? Did Speaker Johnson consult you, sir?
Terry, so...
Yes, multiple times.
Okay, Terry, so the camera can't go any further than that, so I'll say to the cameraman who can hear me to turn right around, because that's our cutoff of where we're not allowed to shoot anymore. Give us a second to get situated, but let me unpack what the news of that was. That's obviously the top Democrat in the House, Hakeem Jeffries. And the question facing Democrats at this hour are, what are they going to do? Are they going to vote yes on this differently than they did last night? Because they have the power to tank this. And it seemed like Hakeem Jeffries, as you just heard in that conversation with me live on the air, says that the elements of the government funding legislation that he and Democrats objected to last night are now out of this legislation. I asked him if that means Democrats should vote yes on this, and he said that's what they're going to discuss in this closed-door meeting here. We got to move this camera, Terry, but that is what just happened. So it appears Democrats are not being told by Jeffries, at least at this early hour, to vote no. I can tell you that's a different Hakeem Jeffries than we saw last night when they were considering that different government funding plan. When he walked into a similar meeting last night when there was a different plan on the table, he called the plan laughable. He said nothing like that tonight, Terry.
All right, so maybe the glimmerings of hope for some kind of deal there. Jill Bryan, good work there in the hallways as always. And thank you to Selena Wang and Alex Berchet as well. We're going to take a break, and coming up, we will return to our coverage of the breaking news out of Germany, a car plowing at high speed into a Christmas market. At least 2 are dead, 60 injured. German authorities treating this as an act of terrorism. We'll have new details coming in right after the break.
Frosted Flakes, good? They're great. Great.
They're still great, Grandpa.
See? Told ya. They're great.
Pain hits fast, so get relief fast. Only Tylenol Rapid Release Gels have laser-drilled holes. They release medicine fast for fast pain relief. Tylenol Rapid Release Gels.
You spend $315 a month on subscriptions?
How? I only have like 3 or 4.
That's what you think. With Rocket Money, you can see our upcoming charges in one place, including the subscriptions you forgot about.
Like what?
Like that meal delivery kit you never use.
I thought I canceled that.
And that car wash subscription.
That too.
You're even paying for 2 of the same wine club subscription.
Okay, I'll call and cancel.
Wait, Rocket Money can cancel them for you.
Really?
Yeah, all it takes is a few taps. Tell Rocket Money today.
When I was younger, my calling was to play football.
But as I grew older, I realized life isn't about how many people you can knock down. It's about how many people you can lift up. At Ram, our calling is to build game-changing trucks. So when you find your calling, nothing can stop you from answering it.
During the Ram Wrap Up the Year sales event, get $6,500 combined cash allowance. Plus, current Ford brand owners or lessees get $2,000 bonus cash on the purchase of select 2025 Ram 1500 trucks.
This is the Tempur-Pedic Adapt mattress, and we designed it to help make aches and pains a thing of the past. Because our most advanced, infinitely adaptable Tempur material eases your pressure points, inch by inch and molecule by molecule, in a way that no other mattress can. All night, every night. Save up to $500 now on select adjustable mattress sets and discover the award-winning Tempur-Pedic. Learn more at TempurPedic.com.
Welcome back. I'm Terry Moran here in Washington, and we are continuing to follow the breaking news out of Germany tonight. At least 2 people have been killed. 68 other people have been injured after a car traveling at high speed plowed into a Christmas market in Germany. A suspect is in custody. He is, according to authorities, a Saudi Arabian doctor in his 50s who has lived in Germany since 2006. This attack taking place in the city of Magdeburg, Germany, west of Berlin. About 250, 300,000 people there. Their market crowded at that hour. Just about 3 hours ago, a little bit more than 3 hours ago now. Joining us now, our ABC News chief foreign correspondent, Ian Pannell. Ian, what are you hearing at this hour about this attack?
Yeah, I mean, we're certainly getting more pieces of the puzzle. We're still awaiting an official press conference by German security authorities, but the Prime Minister of the state in which Magdeburg is based and the Interior Minister of that state have been giving sort of impromptu press conferences nearby. We now know, tragically, that at least 2 people have been killed, and we also now understand that one of those killed was a toddler, the other an adult, possibly the parent, but we don't know that yet. Over 60 have been injured. We also understand from a US source, a security source, that German authorities are regarding this as a potential act of terrorism. We certainly know that, again, local authorities were saying that the act certainly appeared deliberate, and we can't show you the whole of the CCTV footage from the site. It's too tough to watch, but you know, we have looked at it. It certainly appears a deliberate act. It's a brutal, brutal video to watch as this car plows at high speed into this packed Christmas market just 5 days beforehand. Now, we know there's been a lot of pressure about trying to tighten security measures. The National Interior Minister, speaking just a few weeks ago in Germany, had said that there was no indication that Christmas markets were no indication of a credible, concrete security threat. So I think there are going to be lots of questions about what security measures were in place here, given that Germany has experienced an attack like this. It was an attack a few years ago in Berlin that killed 13 people by an Islamic extremist. So it has always been a concern for many, many years. Across Europe, of course, Germany's famous for these beautiful Christmas markets, also parts of France and Belgium too. There had been a suggestion that other authorities across Europe were also concerned about a possible increase threat environment. And just one last thing, we understand that the United States is in contact with the local authorities to try and ascertain whether or not there are any US citizens at that market at the time. Terry?
Got it. Thank you for that, Ian. And if I can follow up, having lived over there, covered that rash of attacks that seemed never ending for several years in the mid-2010s, has there been a sense that problem was managed, under control, whatever you might say, or has there been a continuing concern that affected daily life of people?
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, we went through that terrible period. There were attacks here in London, London Bridge, at Borough Market, attacks in France, obviously terrible attacks in Spain as well, and in Germany. So we seem to have every few weeks those kind of spate of lone wolf, if you like, terrorist attacks. Of course, we saw more organised. A lot of them were inspired by ISIS. But since the downfall of ISIS and the weakening of ISIS, the number of those attacks certainly seems to have diminished. A lot of places, I mean, here in London, for example, you can't walk, when you walk across some of the main bridges, like Westminster Bridge, near Big Ben and the Houses of Parliament, they have these huge metal structures on the sidewalk. That means it's totally impossible to get a vehicle through there. And again, the Rambla in Barcelona, which was the scene of that terrible truck attack, again, security measures being put in place to try and stop those kinds of things happening. So I think there is a general perception here that that threat level has diminished, as ISIS as a threat has diminished, Al-Qaeda as a threat has diminished, and of course we've been reporting on different conflicts and different tensions in different areas. But I think everybody is now going to be looking again at the security measures that are in place. There'll still be many Christmas markets across the continent that are going to take place. We have plenty here in Britain as well. Everyone's now going to be looking at the security measures, and I don't doubt there'll be more than one family with kids who are going to say, maybe not this year.
Yeah, and which operates as a kind of triumph for the terrorists. That part of their point is to demoralize and to frighten people into changing their lives. That's on what you might call the homeland side of European countries and of this country as well. You cover the Middle East and wars there extensively, have over the years. What, in your assessment, is the nature of the kind of threat that drove these attacks 10 years ago, really since 9/11, and did seem to abate for a little while?
There was a lot of anger, pretty much about the US-led response to 9/11, primarily in Iraq, and that opened up a can of worms, a whole series of events. And in some senses, the events that we've seen just play out in the last couple of weeks in Syria are still part of the reverberations from that shock of the unseating of Saddam Hussein, the unleashing of this rise in fanaticism, first of all, the growth of Al-Qaeda in Iraq. It then gave birth to ISIS, sectarian violence, the increasing strength of the so-called axis of resistance. We saw the Arab Spring happen, which started off as a civilian-led moment of hope, but quite rapidly in a number of countries like Libya and like Syria led to extremism. And so, yeah, we're still kind of feeling the shockwaves from that. Now, of course, it also unleashed kind of huge waves of people moving around the region. And there were certainly concerns from a lot of security agencies across Europe that the people had embedded themselves in decent, honest citizens who were seeking refuge from war, as they are entitled to do, and that cynically terrorist extremists were using those crowds of people that we saw leaving Syria and other places, getting on boats and going to places. And this is something that, you've seen in the United States being mentioned by a lot of politicians on the right, saying that Europe has made a rod for its own back by allowing all these people in. Well, clearly, the truth is that the vast majority of people are law-abiding, hard-working citizens. Many of them are far harder working than the national populations. But for many people, it has become a cynical opportunity to try and expose the weaknesses in what they see as the kind of the way that the West has treated Islam and treated the Islamic world. Now, it does feel like we're potentially entering a different era at the moment, with the settling of a lot of scores, the weakening of Hezbollah, the overthrow of Assad, the weakening of Iran has really kind of shaken up the trees in a way that I think we haven't seen in the region. We have to see how that plays out. Syria is still prone to extremism. We saw today US attacks against ISIS targets. They say they managed to kill another senior ISIS leader in Syria, who had interestingly moved into former regime areas, former regime bases. So in other words, ISIS is also using this moment to try and capitalize. And of course you have ISIS in Afghanistan. So the threats have changed. They have slightly diminished, but they certainly have not gone away.
Yeah, that's fascinating. The upheaval in the Middle East, could be part of a new chapter in this long-running struggle that we have against this scourge. Ian Pannell in London, thanks very much. We're going to take a break, and coming up, we will return to the Capitol. House lawmakers are getting ready to vote on that spending bill, which would avoid a government shutdown before the deadline of midnight tonight. We'll have more right after the break. This is ABC News Live.
Nothing makes a gathering great like Eggland's best eggs. They're just so delicious. With better nutrition, too. For us, it's eggs any style, as long as they're the best. Eggland's best.
Here's the deal. You're losing 1% of your skin's collagen each year starting in your 20s. That's why you need me, your collagen banker. Collagen Bank strengthens the collagen you have and builds the collagen you don't. For plump and glowing skin.
We ready? I need to get me a new phone. You need to trade in that old busted up phone. You can get you a brand new iPhone 16 Pro from T-Mobile. It's on there. At T-Mobile, it's better over here. Families save 20% every month. What a deal.
To all you new and existing customers, trade in your busted old phone, and T-Mobile will give you a brand new iPhone 16 Pro with Apple Intelligence on us. Plus, families can save 20% when they switch.
T-Mobile is one of none. Go get that. What he said.
Welcome to the Credit Karmaverse, a place where financial progress can happen at the speed of delight. Here we help you achieve your money goals fast, like improving your credit scores in a matter of days fast, so you don't have to wait around to see your hard work pay off. Oh, well done. Simply scan your screen to experience Intuit Credit Karma for yourself.
Wherever news breaks, it's so important to always remember that lives are changed. Getting you behind the stories as they happen. ABC News Live Prime. We'll take you there.
Streaming free on ABC News Live.
All right, now we return to that breaking news right here in Washington, D.C. Lawmakers are expected to vote on a funding bill that would avoid a government shutdown. The deadline for that bill to get passed before the government shuts down is midnight tonight. Debate is already underway on the House floor as Republicans scramble to reach an agreement ahead of that midnight deadline. Speaker of the House Mike Johnson has vowed a shutdown won't happen. He said that before. He says the Republicans right now are unified on this new measure. Two previous bills have already failed to draw enough support. Let's bring in ABC News' Jay O'Brien live on Capitol Hill. Jay, what's the status there?
Yeah, so Terry, Democrats meeting right now behind closed doors, one floor below me here. And again, as you and I have been discussing, but for those just joining us, it really all hinges on Democrats at this hour. This is the third attempt by Speaker Mike Johnson to put a funding plan together. The first one drew the ire of President-elect Trump and Elon Musk. The second one got 30 Republicans to vote against it last night, and virtually every single Democrat marching in lockstep together voting against it, so it failed. Now there is this third attempt, a change of the legislation that takes a raising of the debt ceiling out of the equation. It's no longer included, and that was a demand of President-elect Trump, but nonetheless, it is out of the legislation. It's going to be voted on the floor any second, and House Democrats really have all the cards here, because the way that Speaker Johnson has chosen to put this on the floor, it would need two-thirds support of the House, which would be 80 or so Democrats, to vote forward. And so we just caught up with Hakeem Jeffries, the top Democrat in the House, moments ago, asking him what will he advise Democrats to do here. Here is what he said.
What needed to come out of the bill has come out of the bill, and now we've got to evaluate the four corners of what remains in the legislation.
Does that mean Democrats should vote for it if what needed to come out came out?
Well, that's what we're going to discuss. But the reckless effort to remove the ability for the American people to have a real discussion in terms of fiscal responsibility by trying to jam a debt ceiling suspension into the...
So again, Jeffries there, not necessarily saying how he's going to tell his caucus to vote, but saying that, in his view, the objectionable parts of that government funding plan that was put on the floor last night, i.e. that raising of the debt ceiling that Donald Trump demanded, that has now been taken out, and it means that he says that the legislation is much different than what happened last night. And I can tell you that's a much different Hakeem Jeffries than the Hakeem Jeffries we saw walking into a similar Democratic meeting before that vote last last night on Plan B. Last night, Jeffries said that what was put on the table by Mike Johnson last night was quote-unquote laughable, and Democrats voted in lockstep against it. Tonight, he's saying something much different, and it begs the question, how will Democrats vote as that voting is underway right now as we speak, Terry?
All right, so we're looking at the count there, Jay. What are you looking for? What obviously the final total, but as this vote to keep the government open, this is not a major legislative event. This is basic housekeeping of the American government, which our Congress time and time again has shown is very difficult in these divided times. So, Jay, what are you looking for as they cast this vote? We got 12 and a half minutes remaining, although sometimes those 12 and a half minutes can become 20 very quickly. But what are you looking for?
Yeah, those 12 and a half minutes are going to be a half hour, Terry. But the reality is the two things to look for here. First, how many Republicans vote against this measure? There are Republicans that frequently vote against any kind of temporary extension of government funding because they believe the government spends too much money. They also believe that there shouldn't be temporary extensions of government funding at all, that government shouldn't be run that way. And so they kind of have a procedural test vote against it, if you will, or rather a vote of conscience against it, if you will. So last night, 30 Republicans voted against that package Mike Johnson put on the floor. This is a different package, but watch for how many Republican no votes there are. The other thing, of course, to watch for is how many Democratic yes votes there are. They need about 80 in order to pass this. And so if Democrats start voting together, they're largely going to vote in unity together, meaning that if you start to see a number of Democratic yes votes, that's a good sign that the party feels confident that leadership is not going to punish them or not whip against, if you will, which is the phrase on Capitol Hill as to telling someone one way to vote for, whipping for votes. And leadership is not going to vote against this bill if you start to see some Democrats vote yes, and that's a good sign that you could see a large chunk of Democrats vote yes. And then, of course, that would mean that this would pass.
All right, well, Jay, thank you for that. So now I'm looking at the numbers. You got 11 Republicans already voting no, only 3 Democrats voting yes. Early days, I suppose, early going, right? But that's not good, right?
It's unclear exactly. I mean, 3 Democrats voting no, or 3 Republicans voting no doesn't necessarily change the calculus, because last night you got 30 Republicans voting no. It really depends on how Democrats are going to do. Those no Republican votes, they're going to be a protest vote against Republican leadership, frankly, and against Speaker Mike Johnson and this plan that he has now cobbled together for the 3rd time. So that means if you're Mike Johnson, you're in a tough spot if you have a significant number of Republican no votes. But on the flip side of that, again, it's Democrats who largely are going to have, not necessarily to pass this entirely on their own, because you expect a chunk of Republican yes votes, but it's going to hinge on what Democrats choose to do. Do they choose to lend those yes votes to Republicans? So keep an eye on that.
All right, Jay, thank you. I'm going to follow up with you, but we just put up the shot outside the room where Democrats have been meeting, discussing just how much support they want to lend this effort and keep the government open, and in some ways help Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, who's been caught between a Musk and a hard place. It was Elon Musk who originally blew this delicately negotiated agreement that had been quietly negotiated for weeks between Democrats and Republicans to keep the government open, let everybody go home for Christmas, and then live to fight another day, namely after the next president, Donald Trump, takes office on January 20th of next year. But Musk didn't like what he saw in this bill, and he blew it up. A lot of what he saw turned out not to be true. He started posting things that he thought were in the bill on his X platform. Quickly, it turned out they were false. But let's go to Selena Wang, who covers President Trump, co-President Trump, in the way some wags are already describing him, given how Musk has thrown his weight around. What do you hear from Trump world?
Yeah, look, I sense a lot of frustration when I'm talking to people in Trump world. I mean, first of all, there's frustration around how Speaker Johnson has handled it. According to one source, Donald Trump had made clear to Speaker Johnson multiple times since the election that the debt ceiling was a key demand. So this source pushing back against the notion that it was a last-minute demand. But if you do look at the TikTok, what you see is that Elon Musk was attacking that bill, that original compromise bill, for pretty much an entire day until Donald Trump weighed in with that new demand, saying that he wanted the debt ceiling abolished or extended. But again, this source pushing back against the notion that that was last last minute, saying that Elon Musk and Trump had been on the same page on both the CR and on the debt ceiling, and making the argument that Speaker Johnson knew about this and it's his fault for not properly socializing that within the Republican conference. But now, look, the question is, what is a reaction if Donald Trump doesn't get exactly what he wants? Now, we haven't heard the president-elect weigh in yet, but according to one source from Trump world, they could still view it as a win if it passes without that debt ceiling, because they can argue that, number one, they were able to trim a lot of the fat, the pork that they viewed was part of that original compromise deal, and they can also argue that they got a strategic view of what the Republican conference looks like. We saw from that earlier vote that there were more than 30 House Republicans who defied Donald Trump and voted down that deal. But look, the president-elect certainly isn't going to be happy that the debt ceiling is not addressed in this, given that he made very clear that he's willing to allow the government to shut down to get that piece through, because Donald Trump does not want that hanging over his head in his first 100 days in office when he wants to push through this ambitious legislative agenda. He wants to have the ability to borrow more and to spend more, despite many House Republicans being concerned about lifting or abolishing that debt ceiling. Donald Trump does not want to have to deal with that when he is in office after inauguration. He wants all of this done on President Biden's watch. And quite frankly, anything that goes down in terms of the government shutting down, he's already said is Biden's fault, and it's going to hurt Biden, not him.
Well, Biden's not running for office anymore, and he'll be the next president. He'll be able to blame Biden, at least in his own mind. If memory serves, he was all for the debt ceiling hampering Biden when it had to be raised under Biden and blasting it. Now he doesn't want anything to do with it. No president does, I suppose. Let's turn to ABC News' Alex Brochet, who's been reporting this. Alex, this seems to happen a lot.
More and more frequently, Terry, this debt ceiling or the threat of a shutdown or actual shutdowns. But to kind of give you context here, since about fiscal year 1977, there have been 20 gaps in funding. They've ranged in length from a single day to a little more than a month. But this would be the 21st, and certainly they have been happening more and more frequently. But you know, as we're watching, I got the dual screen up here. I do think it's still very early, Terry, but as of now, there's not a single Democrat, as I'm seeing, that has voted no on this, which as Jay was pointing out earlier, is a solid sign for this CR's future. But you know, the reality here is, you know, there are millions of livelihoods which are going to be impacted, which could be impacted by a potential shutdown. About 3.5 million federal workers, which could be impacted by a shutdown. Those paychecks, if it lasted into the new year past January 3rd, that would be about the first time that many of these employees would see that first gap in pay. And also keep in mind, there are a number of government contractors as well who are not required to work without pay, but also they're not guaranteed back pay. And so when you talk about something like this happening, number one, it happening, period, but also it happening at a time like this during the holiday season, I mean, some 60,000 TSA workers could potentially be impacted here. And many of them would be working without a paycheck. And for those that aren't in government, Terry, the way that kind of rolls down the pipe is that, look, this busy travel season, you'd see longer lines and more stress at the airport because, you know, the workers there are not getting paid potentially, and they'd have a backlog because they wouldn't be able to hire additional workers.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'd prefer just as somebody who flies pretty frequently to have the air traffic controllers getting paid when they manage the flight that I'm on. But let's go back to ABC's Joe O'Brien, now outside Capitol, the U.S. Capitol there, waiting for Democratic lawmakers. Jay, as Alex just pointed out, there are no votes, no nay votes from the Democrats right now, and 43 voting in favor of this bill. How are things going from your perspective?
I'm getting my steps in, Terry. So previously we were outside a House Democratic meeting to try to figure out how Democrats would vote because, of course, this hinges on Mike Johnson getting the requisite support he needs from Democrats. Earlier on in the night, I told you that he needed about 80 Democratic votes. We're actually going to revise that to around 90 only because we're factoring in the number of Republican no votes that we're also expecting here, given the number of no votes that there were last night. Now, this is tough legislative math because it's 2/3 of everybody who shows up and votes and is present, and so you don't fully know that until the end, right? How many absences do you have? Stuff like that. So put it around 90 Democrats have to vote yes. And while that seems like a tall order for the Republican Speaker of the House, he looks on track to get that. Obviously, the vote isn't over yet, but we have no Democratic no votes, and this vote is in a much different position, frankly, than last night's vote was when Democrats voted in lockstep against that measure. And largely, the concern I heard from Democrats is that they did not like that last-minute inclusion of raising the debt ceiling. That was a strict demand from President-elect Trump, who said Republicans should not vote on any temporary government funding measure that doesn't include a raising of the debt ceiling. The debt ceiling doesn't need to be risen right now. It doesn't come due until about the spring. But Donald Trump essentially said he didn't want it to be a political issue in the first few months of his second term when he has other legislative priorities he wants to do. He doesn't want a bruising political fight over the debt ceiling, so he demanded that congressional Republicans raise it before it needed to be risen. So that's what Mike Johnson tried to put in the temporary government funding package last night, but it failed because Democrats called that play, and they said that they didn't want that political issue to be taken off the table, particularly when Republicans have been the ones who have wanted to use the debt ceiling as a political cudgel and negotiating tactic in the past. And remember, the debt ceiling is the cap on how much the U.S. can borrow in order to pay its bills. And so if you hit the debt ceiling and it doesn't get risen, that's economic catastrophe for the U.S. economy. Point being, that whole thing has been taken out of this now, and Hakeem Jeffries and Democrats have said that the thing they didn't like, the raising of the debt ceiling, was taken out. This new legislation only extends government funding, has disaster relief in it, and aid for farmers. And therefore, with that debt ceiling rise out of this, Democrats can get behind that, and they are getting behind it in large numbers, which puts this on track to pass. Hasn't fully passed yet, and obviously this vote ain't over, and this has been a chaotic few days, and anything could happen, but certainly a much different vibe on this vote, if you will, than last night.
Yeah, it ain't over till it's over, as the great American philosopher Yogi Berra said. And while you were talking, I just got a note from our colleague Ben Siegel reporting there in the building behind you, in the U.S. Capitol behind you. And Ben tells us that behind closed doors just moments ago, the leader of the Democrats, Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader, says that the White House, President Biden, and the majority leader of the Senate, Chuck Schumer of New York, all support the new package coming to the floor, and that they would as well. The House Democrats will as well. So just as you were predicting there, it does seem like the Democrats have gotten behind this, and it seems like Donald Trump's demand is not going to be made part of this effort, that Donald Trump's demand that the debt limit be reached, and that is the area of the agreement. So Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, a Republican, seems to have, stiff-armed President-elect Donald Trump, saying we'll deal with the debt limit when you're president, which Trump doesn't want to happen, and the Democrats are saying, okay, then we will help you. That sounds like a good old-fashioned compromise on what, as I say, is basic housekeeping. They're just keeping the government open. But it looks like politics working a little bit there tonight, Jay.
Yeah, let me give you a sense of what was going to happen now with the debt ceiling, according to Republicans. So it was taken out of the calculus here. They went against the early demands of Donald Trump. I asked Steve Scalise, the #2 Republican in the House, does that mean in a sense that you're defying Donald Trump's wishes? Steve Scalise says, well, it wasn't us who defied Donald Trump. It was Democrats who voted against that government funding measure that included a rising of the debt ceiling last night. So he's trying to kind of put it on Democrats. But the reality is Republicans took it out of this funding measure that they now have on the floor that looks on track to pass because they knew it wasn't going to get the Democratic votes that it needed. Now, what they promised their own conference earlier today, according to sources, when they unveiled this Plan C, was tackling the debt ceiling and raising of the debt ceiling early next year when they also have to tackle the regular process of crafting the federal budget. And they have also promised to, included in that, create harsh cuts to the federal budget to the tune of $2 or so trillion. That will, of course, be incredibly difficult. But that's what they've promised their members at this hour. And so they said to presumably Donald Trump, but definitely to the Republican members, according to sources, that they're not going to abandon this idea of rising the debt ceiling before it needs to be risen in the spring. They're going to tackle it in January when Republicans will have control of the House, control of the Senate, and then, of course, come January 20th, control of the White House with Donald Trump in office.
Okay, so they're getting their ducks in a row. Thank you, Jay. And just to let you and our audience know, the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, has just spoken with reporters. He says that he is confident that this funding bill will pass. As he walked into the House chamber, he told reporters that. And why? Speaker of the House said, because I don't think anybody wants to shut down the government. A little common sense from the Speaker of the House. He also said, Speaker Johnson did, that he has spoken with Elon Musk, saying, quote, he fully understands what we are doing. And in fact, here is a social media post on his own platform X, formerly known as Twitter. Elon Musk saying the Speaker did a good job here given the circumstances. It went from a bill that weighed pounds to a bill that weighed ounces. Ball should now be in the Dem court. From Elon Musk, perhaps the most powerful man in America. Let's bring in ABC News contributor, former Republican congressman from New York, John Katko. John, what do you think of what's going on here, having served in the House and watched tonight's shenanigans?
One thing's for sure, I'm very thankful I'm no longer there. It is such a mess. And the one thing that always bothered me with these continuing resolutions is American people, I don't think, grasp what happens to the budgets of all the agencies in the government. It's a height of inefficiency because that is all they're doing tonight is kicking the can down the road for a few weeks. And then they're going to have this fight again. The budget starts September 30th of each year. And virtually never do we meet that budget deadline anymore. And it's very hard for agencies to plan. And you want to talk about something that the DOGE or the government efficiency movement in the next administration should tackle this, because the amount of money that's wasted in the Department of Defense alone because of continuing resolutions is stunning. It's hundreds of millions of dollars at a minimum. And for all these agencies, it's very hard to plan. So when I see this going on, and I'm glad that they finally are going to keep the lights on and for all the government workers, but it's a height of inefficiency. And it's the one thing that Congress is supposed to be doing in the House is implement a budget. It seems very, very difficult to get one nowadays. And that's very, very disturbing.
Yeah, it surely is, John. I'm seeing now that passing the 300 yay votes, this bill will pass. The government will stay open. Let's bring in Democratic strategist and co-founder of Lift Our Voices, Julie Roginski. And Julie, I just wonder about Elon Musk's role here. I was thinking the other day when he tanked the original bill, which was delicately negotiated between the people's elected representatives, Democrat and Republican, he didn't like it, so he put several posts on his social media platform X, formerly known as Twitter, and down went that bill. I can't think of another more powerful private American rich guy since somebody like John D. Rockefeller. What do you think of Musk here?
You know what, Terry? I'm disgusted with what Hakeem Jeffries just did. Elon Musk, who's not elected to anything, just effectively blew up a carefully crafted bipartisan bill. And after allowing that to happen, Hakeem Jeffries came back and said, well, okay, I'll negotiate again. No. What he should have said, what the Democratic caucus should have done, is say to Mike Johnson, if you are going to bend the knee to Elon Musk, who is not a member of this chamber the last time we checked, we are not playing ball. Either we go back to the original bill, to the original deal, or we're out. We're done. That's how you teach them a lesson. You don't go and bend the knee to Elon Musk.